Okay, so we've been doing responsive design. We've been creating a web page that will be responsive to the screen width of the device that is viewing it. And so we started mobile first. So we started with a page that is approximately phone size. So it would look like this on a phone. And then in the second video, we widen that out to, I don't want to overdo it here. Let's see, I think it was something like this. Yeah, we widened it out to a layout that looks like this that would be appropriate for a tablet, okay? And you could live with this for even, it turned red. You could live with this for a desktop, right? But I have more in mind. I want to get more complicated and a little bit more horizontal for a desktop. And so I was testing the waters with this at media query to see basically where I wanted to transition from a tablet layout to a desktop layout. And I determined that this was about the size, which is about 800 pixels. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to take advantage of this at media query and turn it into our desktop layout. Okay, so our desktop layout is going to be a little bit more complex. What we're going to do is we're going to keep, so for the body tag, we're going to keep the existing font family, but we're going to have a background color and we're going to have a wrapper with it's also a background color, but not as back. All right, so for our background color for our body, we're going to have, go look at our color palette. I'm going to use this super light green color. So we'll copy that and paste it right in here. And that'll be our background color. Now, if I just show you this now, it's going to look mighty odd, right? Where the whole page kind of turns green. But that's because I don't actually want it in that space. This layout is going to use an ID of a wrapper. In the previous video, we noticed in the HTML that there's a div tag in here with a wrapper that holds the rest of the page content. Here's the closing div. But we haven't taken advantage of it yet. We haven't used it yet. So what we're going to do with this thing is we're going to give it a set width, but we want it to be responsive, so we're going to use a percentage instead of a fixed size for this. 85%. Okay, but even having said that, we don't want it to go too wide. We do want to control our layout to some extent. So we'll set a max width of 1024 pixels. Okay. You don't have to do that, but that's the way this particular page is designed. Okay. I want to center this wrapper in the background, so we're going to set the margin to auto. Okay, and then I want to fill the wrapper with a background color that's just white. So we get our white back that we just got rid of from our body section. Okay, and then I do want to do a shadow on the. I want to do a shadow on the box itself. And so we're going to offset this just a little bit, 3 pixels to the right and to the bottom. And then we're going to give it a nice 10 pixel spread, so it's got a big gradation. And then to keep it subtle here, I want to use an existing color from our color palette for our background color. I'm going to use this green color right here. Okay, and I want to play with the shadows such that I also have a negative shadow. So I'm going to put a shadow on the left side of the box. That's why it's a negative number. And and then I don't want to go on the top, so it's a 0 for the top, right? But then we're going to go ahead and use these same spread and color values. All right, and then I'm going to set the padding of this wrapper to 0 pixels. All right, let's take a look and see what that looks like if I refresh the page. Okay, so now this wrapper box fills the space. My background color on the body is here. My background color on the wrapper is here. Here's my shadow on both sides of the box to kind of pop it off away from the background. The width of this box is 85% the size of the container, so this is as small as it's going to get, because any smaller than this, and it pops to the tablet view. Okay, but if I widen it out, it will get wider. Okay, but I've got a max width set to 1024. So even though it's going to get wider, it's not going to get any wider than that. All right, so my layout looks horrible at this width, but that's okay. I'm not there yet. I haven't created that part yet. Okay, so I do quite like my background, my header, right? I don't have any qualms about anything having to do with this header, so I don't need to make any changes to the style sheet for that reason. My navigation, I want to do completely differently. So we're going to come down here and we're going to set our nav. I'm going to do it significantly differently such that it's going to be easier to reset it to start with. So I'm going to set all to unset. Okay, and then I'm going to go back in here and set a new nav. I'm going to set a width of 150 pixels. I'm going to set the height of the navigation to automatic. I'm going to set a float on this. You know what? I probably don't need to set the height to auto because I never set a navigation height anywhere else, did I? No, I didn't set a navigation height anywhere else. So it's already set to auto by default. Okay, but I'm going to float it to the left side of the screen. And I think my existing background color is not quite what I want here. I want the nav to have a different background color than the list items of the nav, but that background color is not going to show, so I don't really need to set it. All right, and then, sorry as I think these things through here, and then I don't want any margin or padding on my nav. All right, so that's the first step. And then you recall that within that, I've got a UL, and inside my UL are the list items, and then inside the LIs, or list items, are links, A for anchor. So I've got multiple levels to the content of this nav. For my UL previously, I had it set to flex, and I don't want it to be set to flex any longer. So I need to do a nav UL, and let's see. I think I could probably do display block. And let's see if I can get away with that. What that should do is fill its container, and its container is set to 150 pixels. So that should work. All right, and then I want to do nav UL LI. All right, so previously on my nav UL LI, I had them set to 100% width, and I had a margin set on the right and left, and then I had the text align to center and the padding set to 0. So the only thing there that I particularly want to change is this margin. Okay, so this margin I actually want set to no margin at all. I don't want a margin on the left and right of the list items. So by using this shorthand, this should set a 0 margin all the way around. Okay, let's take a look and see if I'm anywhere in the ballpark here. All right, so I am in the ballpark. Here are my list items, but I miscalculated when it came to the background. I was thinking that I didn't need that background, but now I realize that I indeed do need that background color for my nav. Okay, and the background color that I want to choose for the nav is, in my color palette, it's going to be this light khaki color right here. Okay, paste it in there. And let's see how it looks. All right, so here's my navigation. I do think that I'd like to have a bottom border in between these elements. So I've got to put that in. And let's see, where would that have been? I'm thinking that that's probably part of this LI, list item. Nope, that did not work. Let's see. A little bit surprised by that, but border bottom. So I'm guessing what I need to do to make that work is to also say that this is display block. Hopefully that won't hurt anything. Let me tab these in. All right, there we go. So now I've got my border bottom in between these elements. And I actually really like it a lot. There's two things that I need to do about this, though. I need to get this content pushed over. And you can see that it's attempting to do it itself, but I need some margin in between. And I also want this bottom one to line up as well. So because this story is in the section called section, and this story is in the section called article, the one thing is that both of them are, both section and article are inside an HTML5 element called main. So I'll go to main, and I'll set the margin left to 160 pixels. Okay, and the reason for that is that the width of my nav is 150 pixels. And so I want to clear it plus 10 pixels. Oops, that's a colon instead of a semicolon. Okay, so if I refresh that, okay, now I've got this space right here. Now it looks like somehow it overdid it a little bit. That looks like more than 10 pixels to me. There must be some margin or padding inside of section or main. Anyway, I'm in the ballpark. Now, one thing that I intended to do with this layout is I intended to have this color continue all the way down, and I can't do it easily because with my nav, because I can't do that as a background color without telling it where to stop. And if I set a height on this nav, I would also have to set a matching height on the main. And the problem with doing that is that if I shrink my page or widen my page, the height of main and the height of main varies, right? It does this at a minimum, but as I move it in, it'll push that bottom down, right? So I can't put that in there that way. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to put something in the background. I'm going to put something in the background, but not a color. I'm actually going to do an image that repeats all the way down. Okay, so let me see if I've already made this. I haven't already made it, so just bear with me. It will only take a moment. So I'm opening up Photoshop, and the width of my navigation is 150 pixels. So I'm going to say new, and my new element, the width is set to 150 pixels. The height is set to 2 pixels. It doesn't really matter what height you set this to. I could set it to 1 pixel, which actually makes more sense because it gives me the maximum amount of flexibility for the changing height. All right, so I'm going to create that, and it just shows me this tiny little line, and I'm going to zoom in on it. And then all I want to do is I've got my foreground color set to the same hexadecimal code as the background of my nav. Okay, and then I'm going to fill this with that color. And then I'm going to go ahead and save this as a PNG, and we'll call this nav BG, nav background, nav BG. And I don't need to compress it, it's so tiny. Okay, and that's it. I'll close Photoshop. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is inside my wrapper, I'm going to bring that image in. So here's my wrapper, and we'll do a background image, and we'll specify the URL of, what do I call it? navbg.png. Okay, and that'll bring that in at the top left of the background. But then I'm going to repeat the background. I'm going to repeat that background, but only on the y-axis. Which means it'll repeat up and down, but not left to right. Okay, so let's see if that's doing the trick. Okay, and that just filled in the rest of this navigation. And the nice thing about that is the navigation is set to a set 150 pixels wide, so these will always match, but the rest of the page is set to percentages. Sorry, the rest of the page is set to percentages, so they'll widen and shrink as needed. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that navigation, and now the next thing I need to do is look at the layout. Now somehow I ended up with some extra margin in here, so let's see if we can figure out where that's coming from. I've got my main, and then I've got section, and I've got article. So it must be coming from one of those three things. Margin left is set to 160 pixels. If I shrink this down to 150 pixels, okay, that's working just fine. Okay, that's working just fine. Okay, now my max width for this page is set to 1024, so it's never going to be any wider than this. When I shrink it down a little bit until this text starts to wrap around the image, I actually like that layout just fine. I don't have any problem with anything left on the layout at this width. But when I widen it to its max width of 1024, then I got an awkward space here, and I've got a crowded headline here, and so I'm going to take care of those things. All right, so the way I could take care of this space here is by shrinking this image a little bit, such that the text does something more like this. Okay, so I'm going to change the max width on that image. Okay, so right now this image max width is set to 40%. You know what? I'm going to take all three of these styles right now, paste them in here, and then I'll edit them as needed. All right, so this max width is set to 40%. I think I'm going to set a specific width that's the maximum width, right? The image will still grow until it reaches the maximum width. And so I'm going to, you know what? Let's try 30%, see what that looks like. Okay, so at 1024 pixels, 30% works just fine. But what happens when I shrink the page? Is it too small? Okay, by the time you get to about here, right, that's a very small image. That's going to be too small. This one's all right. That one's too small. So I might get crazy, and in addition to this max width, we might try a min width. Maybe 300 pixels. I'm just guessing. Okay, so 300 pixels is a decent size. And then if I grow this, well, it appears to just always stay that size. So in this case, it just never shrinks until we get to the media query. And as long as I'm okay with the smallest possible layout, I guess that's okay. I could go a little bit smaller on that max width, or min width, sorry. Let's try 250 pixels. Yeah, I'm going to split the difference and make it about 280 pixels. And what I'm seeing is this max width isn't doing anything for me now. Okay, we're just going to stick to this minimum width, and it's never going to get any smaller than that, and that's fine. That layout looks fine. Okay, so I'm good with this. And when we stretch this all the way out to here, to the maximum width of 1024, okay, it didn't quite get there for me. No, the whole point was to shrink that, right? And it didn't quite do it for me, did it? Oh, I kind of blew that, didn't I? All right, so we want to shrink the picture. Let's get it back to 250. What have I done wrong here? You know what? I'm just going to say width 200 instead of min width. Okay, so I've kind of landed on a width of this thing of being 280 pixels wide, and then if I shrink the page, it starts to shrink the picture. and I'm just determining that that's too small. So I've kind of blown it here in a number of ways. So I'm going to set the width now, and I'm going to set a min width of 250. And so I'm hoping that that's going to do the best of both worlds. That picture is going to get this big and no bigger, and the picture is going to get this small and no smaller. All right, I can live with that. All right, so at the small size, the bottom one looks good to me. So I widen it out. Continues to look good. Get to maximum size, continues to look good. So I kind of killed two birds with one stone by fixing that image. I've also fixed the space between that image and the thing below it. So I haven't changed any of this. And I'm wondering if I want to change the width of that cow. I might want to change the width of that cow. So let me get rid of article. And let me get rid of the things that I didn't change. And then down here, the only thing I might want to change down here is this max width. Let's try 60% and see what happens. And I don't think anything happened. That's not going to go well, I can tell you right now. Oh, actually it went quite nice. All right, so it's largest. Those cows come out to this size, which I think look pretty good. And then as we shrink the page, they get down to this small, which I think is fine for a secondary image. Okay, and then it pops to the other layout. All right, so I think this is what we have landed on then. Oh, I don't like how, I almost like this. I don't like how this line collapses here. So I think we're just a tiny bit too big. Come on, cows. You're not helping me at all. Are these cows moving at all? I don't think that they are. All right, apparently I got to sneak up on it. All right, that'll do. Okay, so now my my cows are this size at standard desktop. And when I shrink this in, they'll get a little bit smaller, and they'll get all the way down to that size before it breaks. All right, so there's our desktop layout. Not a bad looking page. And what's interesting about this, let's just take one more look at the code. What's interesting about this is that this is mobile first. So the style sheet, without any media queries, the style sheet in its native setting, right, is for mobile device. Our first style sheet is for mobile device. And then we did a media query for a screen width greater than 600 pixels. And this one became the pieces that were changed for a tablet. And then we had another media query for anything larger than 800 pixels wide, and then these are the things that were changed for a desktop machine. So kind of a flip between what you usually see. Usually you see desktop first, and then it shrinks down to a tablet, and then it shrinks down to a mobile device like a phone. We did it the other way around. Starts with a phone, grows to a tablet, and then grows to a desktop. All right, there's another video on some more techniques. If we look at our goals here, we covered using percentages instead of static values. We used max and min width quite a bit. We used our flex boxes, and there are a few things left that we're going to do in another project. One thing that we didn't do was viewport, and we should have done viewport. The thing about viewport, it's easy to ignore because you can't see it on a desktop screen. What viewport does is it adjusts the content to the device screen for an initial scale. And it makes a world of difference on a phone, but you can't see it at all for your desktop. The thing about viewport is that it's not a style, it's a meta tag. It goes in the head section up here. It goes in the head section up here. And it looks like this. So it's meta, and then I believe it's type, viewport, and then another attribute is content. And the content is going to be there's two pieces to it. So it's an attribute, and the first one is the width, and we want to set the width to the device width. Okay, and then the second thing is the initial scale. And we want the initial scale to be 100% of the device width, so we set that to 1.0. All right, so let me just look for any typos. Looks okay. So basically, this meta tag is extremely important for mobile devices, but it doesn't do anything for the way it appears on the desktop. So you'll have to see this. You have to see this on the other devices. The videos that I will splice in for the other devices will have this intact, so you can see what it looks like with a viewport. Okay, I'm going to stop this here, and we'll have a different video for the other pieces of the project.